Before he became a regular figure on Northeast Ohio stages, Don Dixon earned his fame helping to produce some of R.E.M's earliest records, and he even almost produced one of the most iconic rock records of all time, Nirvana's Nevermind.
They were just kind of making up Smells Like Teen Spirit. I don't think they actually had any words, but they played it while we were in a rehearsal one day.
You're listening to Cleveland Magazine's Cleveland Connection podcast, where we take a closer look at the stories and surprising connections to Northeast Ohio in pop culture. My name is Annie Nikoloff. You might recognize Don Dixon from his work with the Smithereens or his band Arrogance, or maybe you've seen him touring with Mary Chapin Carpenter. Or maybe you've witnessed his performances in the local holiday supergroup, Ohio City Singers, which have been a Cleveland Christmas tradition for many years. Don is a music legend, and so is his wife, Marti Jones. They live in Canton, near Marti's hometown of Uniontown, and they've been married for 38 years. We caught up with Don to hear more about his music work and his important role in R.E.M. history, starting with his team-up with Mitch Easter on R.E.M's first two albums, Murmur and Reckoning. Here's our conversation.
Well, Mitch had begun to record them. So Mitch Easter, my friend, I helped him make Murmur and Reckoning, because he asked me to. We were good buddies. I'd helped him build his studio called Drive-In, where his first real place, which was down in Winston-Salem. And he had recorded, I guess the first thing he did was Radio Free Europe, like a version of Radio Free Europe. And then he did a great EP called Chronic Town that I really loved. And we talked about it some. I sort of gave him some advice on things to do and ways to approach it. I might have even done a couple of mixes that didn't get used, but I did listen to it a lot. And I loved the band. And so when they got signed by IRS and Chronic Town did okay, IRS wanted to make another record. And Mitch just wanted me to help him. He just felt like, we were buds, and he felt like I at that point had a lot more experience than he had. Our bands had been on major labels. I'd recorded in a lot of studios, and he just asked me if I would help, and I said sure, because I loved the band. So, this was the early '80s, so there was no organized college radio really. It was just starting to. Radio was still incredibly important in a way that it's maybe not quite as important as it used to be. College radio had no focus at all, but was beginning to get organized. This magazine started called College Media Journal that was almost like a trade magazine, but for the college radio stations. But they still had a tremendous amount of autonomy and freedom, and it was college radio, you'd sign up and you'd have your own show. All you had to do was sign up. But that had been the launching pad for Chronic Town and for a lot of the indie bands at the time that were happening. And R.E.M. was just part of that zeitgeist, really. And we recognized, Mitch and I both recognized that zeitgeist. Mitch is 4 years younger than I am, so he was in a whole different college and high school environment growing up. I was already in college when I met him. He was only 15. He was really more part of that scene than I was. My band had been more of a arena rock kind of band. We were signed to Warner Brothers. We opened for bands like Triumph and Jefferson Starship and stuff. The Cars, bands like that. So we were more in that rock band kind of thing, and they were part of this newer scene, which was still a dance scene. It was actually more of a dance scene than what we did. People don't realize that. I think that R.E.M. was a party band. They really came out. They have much more of an association with the B-52s. They're successful people there in Athens than they do Boston or something like that. Black Oak, Arkansas. But those were the bands that were big. It was fun, and we recognized that they were special and they were different, and we really loved them from the beginning. For not expecting them to get big or anything. There were a lot of good bands that didn't get big like R.E.M. did, but R.E.M. special still. They still are.
What was it like, those sessions, recording? What was it like being in that room?
Well, I mean, they were like a lot of sessions at the time. It was fast. We didn't have much money. We made those records with very little money and really quick, especially for the time, because we worked maybe 3 weeks on each of those records. And that's from the time they showed up in the van. And the first album, they were all sharing one hotel room when we made Murmur, and they'd sort of rotate coming in. I mean, everybody came in at once, but there was a lot of overdub, and it took, in some ways, because of the nature of the way you recorded on analog, it did take more time. You actually really had to be able to play things. I mean, so much of it now is kind of after the fact, and COVID even made it even more kind of piecemeal in some ways, because people had to work autonomously. We recorded them like we recorded almost everybody else we ever recorded. There was nothing particularly special about recordings other than they were a great band with these cool, different kind of songs. And we weren't interested in trying to change them. We just wanted to take what they were doing and just amplify aspects of it and underpin aspects of it with sounds, slightly different sounds, nothing radically different than what they were doing, which was already kind of radical because it was a little bit throwback and a little bit advanced all at the same time, but it didn't use synthesizers. And if you'll recall, you're too young, but if you go back and look at the history books and watch Walter Cronkite's 20th Century, you will see that bands like Bananarama and these bands that were very English kind of drum machine driven were the sort of popular party bands at the time, was really who they were competing with. But they, in their minds, were more like the Velvet Underground and the Doors and those kind of bands. So they were sort of a modern version of the Doors, really.
I know you've gone on to do so much incredible work, like nationally renowned, locally renowned. One, I'd really love to touch in on the story I've heard that you very nearly produced Nirvana's Nevermind. Could you tell me about that?
Well, it's just another one of those things. I got a tape from, I guess, Gary Gersh, who was an A&R guy at Geffen at the time, and was the guy who had signed them from Sub Pop. They had been on Sub Pop, which was a cool label out of Seattle. And this would have been very early in 1990 or 91, maybe. It was somewhere, I think it was already a 9 was in there. But I got this cassette with 4 songs. I remember one of them was Lithium, which is sounds almost exactly the same as the thing that's on the record. Butch Vig had done these demos. Butch ended up producing the record. And I had met Butch when he was in a band on Atlantic, and they had talked to me about producing them. And so I'd already met Butch, but I didn't know him, and he wasn't there when I went out to Tacoma, really, to hang out with him for a couple of days. But, their manager was there, and Gary may have been there. I can't remember. I think Gary might have been there. But they were just kind of making up Smells Like Teen Spirit. I don't think they actually had any words, but they played it while we were in a rehearsal one day. And, I just loved them. I immediately responded to this tape. And I also thought it already sounded really good. Now, the tape had been made by the former drummer, whose name I don't know, but Dave was in the band when I went out to hang out with him. So Dave would maybe been there for 3 weeks or something. And they knew Dave from some other punk bands he'd already been in, I guess in the Midwest or maybe DC or something. I'm not sure what Dave's from. I went out there and we had a good time, and we talked about making the record, tentatively booked some time. And I said, I would really like it if Butch would help, because these demos are really great. If he can show up, that'd be great. So we kind of worked out a budget. We kind of roughly worked out some things. We talked a lot about publishing, and we talked about a lot of things. I was only there, maybe 2 days tops, and I thought I was going to do it. And then the next thing I know, I got word back that they were just going to go with Butch, which I was totally fine with. I thought that was a smart move on their part. Not because I wanted a whole bunch of money, and they'd have to pay me all this money that they didn't have to pay Butch. And he in some ways probably made a more commercial record than I would have made. He has more commercial instincts, as you can tell by what a great job he did with his band Garbage. You know, it's such a worldwide successful band. Whether it was as an important band, or it is not really the issue. But I think he gave them a commercial sound I might not have quite gone for. So I think they made the right decision. They saved a bunch of money too.
That's so wild to think about, one of these iconic records that could have sounded differently in your hands, you know?
It probably wouldn't have been that different. It would have been less double tracking.
Okay.
I mean, the band already kind of took a lot from this band called the Pixies. I don't really remember the Pixies, but it was essentially an Ohio band. And they really, I think, picked up a lot of this. The Pixies had this quiet verses and loud choruses, and like when the singing was there, it would back off, and then when the band was there, it would really jump in. And there's a lot of that in what they do, and this sort of vibe. And plus, you know, it was just a really great combination with Dave. I think Dave brought up another commercial sensibility to it, even though, like I said, Lithium, it sounds almost exactly the same to me. It sounds like they used a track, but I don't think they did. But I love that song. Anyway, the whole record is very good. I was proud of them. I would have liked to have had to check, but that's okay.
Yeah. You know, I know you became a Northeast Ohioan when you and Marty moved to Canton, and obviously when you guys met and just connected with music. I'd love to hear more about that story and how you relocated to Ohio.
Well, Marty is from Ohio. She's from Uniontown, a little town, unincorporated town south. I guess it's grown a lot since she grew up there, just south of Akron. And she was in a band called Color Me Gone, which had been signed, was created by some guys from the Akron scene, a guy that had been in one of those punk bands. I can't remember. George Cabanis was his name, and he was in the Dead Boys or something, one of those. And this guy named Liam Sternberg, who was a songwriter and kind of a producer, mover, shaker. And he got Marty into the band and got them signed to A&M. So Color Me Gone was the name of that band, and they were signed to A&M. And I got called because they were making an EP for A&M. And they weren't crazy about everything and wanted to re-record some stuff. So they called me up, and I came up on New Year's Day of 1984 and stayed in some funky-ass little hotel there in Akron. And we worked on some songs, and I listened, but I told him, I said, you're really crazy to be re-recording these songs. They sound really good. You work on new songs. I don't want to really mess with re-recording these songs. You've already spent all this time and this money on these 6 songs or whatever it was. Just move on. You know? And so they didn't want to hear that. They wanted somebody to come in and say, oh, you know. So I think Ed Stasium or somebody, another guy that has done, Ed came and he did some Smithereens records after me. So I think Ed came in and redid some songs with them. But anyway, that's where I met Marty. So I met her on New Year's Day, 1984, working with Color Me Gone. She was never really 100% sold on that band. I mean, they had some conflicts, and they were on tour, and they had sort of some blow-ups, and she said, I'm not putting up with this anymore. I think they were actually in Athens, Georgia, when she asked her parents to wire her money to take a bus back home from Athens. And I was going to see her the next day. So she broke up with this band. I was going to go see them and talk about the new album. The very next day, they were going to play in Greensboro, North Carolina. I lived in Chapel Hill at the time. So this was sometime in 84. And they didn't show up. And somebody said, oh, Marty's throat, she has a sore throat. I think she had a sore throat from being strangled. But I think it got physical. You know, I wrote her a note, and I said, I found out that she just quit the band. So I just wrote her a note and said, well, I'm sorry you quit the band, but, you know, you can do something without the band, you know. And then a few months later, I was meeting with some A&M people that knew her and knew that I had met her, and they really still liked her, but they were going to drop the band, but they wanted to keep her. but they didn't kind of know what to do with her because she wasn't really a writer. I said, well, that's not a problem. I know a lot of good writers. We'll do like Linda Ronstadt. We'll make modern Linda Ronstadt records so that we just have great songs. We can pick from the entire world of great songs. And they said, oh, okay. So they gave us a little budget and we went in and did some songs, and that's how we met. And we became really good friends. And then that turned into a relationship, for better or worse. I think better, as it turns out, 38 years later, that we've actually been married now for 38 years. But we just met because of Color Me Gone and me producing her. And then we became friends through working together. And then we ruined it all by falling in love. Fooled around and fell in love. And I was recently divorced, and I was trying to she was living here in Canton, and I needed a place to put my stuff. And it's like, compared to so many places, Canton was giving houses away to people. So, I mean, it was just, especially in 1987, I guess, this was 87, that's when I bought the house. And we never expected to stay here. We had a place in LA, we had places, and we didn't expect to live here forever, but it just turned out to be a great place to live. I love it here. And I made really good friends, like with Chris Allen and all the Ohio City Singer folks. And I'm still back in North Carolina a lot. Mitch and I are still very close.
Well, in Northeast Ohio, you're such a big player in the local music scene and just involved in a lot of people's projects. I hear your name a lot. So
I've made a few records. I feel like I haven't really done enough. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I haven't been enough of a participant in this area, but you just can't do everything. And it's mostly been guys that I've been involved with, through Ohio City Singers that I've worked with, Brent Kirby and Austin Walking Kane. Both I've made really cool records with them, and Chris Allen, of course, Roosevelt and Falling Stars and all his different projects, and all the wonderful, the 60 some odd original songs that OCS has recorded. So it's hard to believe to have a band that's made up 60 Christmas songs or holiday songs.
I think that's incredible.
Yeah.
And we need more original Christmas music.
It's a good band, and we're been playing along after we're seeing kids of kids starting to show up at shows. So it's like you'll look out and you'll see a kid that just 20 years ago was 4, dancing with their kid that's 4 now, because they're 24 now, and they've got a 2 or 3 year old that they're bringing to the show, and their parents are still coming to the show. So a lot of 3 generation stuff now.
Having been in multiple music scenes and toured so much and just been in different areas, what kind of strikes you about Northeast Ohio's music world? Like, is there anything you'd like to say about the music scene here in Cleveland and Akron?
Oh, it's incredibly vivid. Yeah, Akron had the Rubber City Rebel era where it had sort of an international stage for a little while. That's kind of gone. Like, we don't have a big national stage for Northeast Ohio right now. I don't know whether having the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame hurts it, or it might hurt it in some ways, because there's always still this constant sort of presence of everything, what's supposedly going on all the time. But the reality is the content is fantastic, and there's great singer-songwriters, there's great bands, there are all different genres of stuff really going on. But that's part of what's happening with the world, is music world. We don't have a great way to focus things, and there's nothing to buy anymore. It's like everybody just kind of listens. So the ephemeral aspect of how you consume music is, I think, kind of frustrating, because it doesn't seem concrete. It's like, it doesn't seem it has the value it used to have. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of competition, I guess.
Well, what are you listening to? What music has been getting you excited lately?
As far as new stuff, my tastes tend to be kind of traditional as far as songs and songwriting. I really like this. There's a band called I'm With Her that Sarah Jarosz, Sarah Watkins, and Aoife O'Donovan have all been around for a long time. Sarah Jarosz is the youngest of the batch, but that just make these great, beautiful little records, but that's sort of part of that sort of Mary Chapin world, that singer-songwriter. I love the Punch Brothers and some of those other acoustic-driven bands as well. But I listen to a lot of jazz. There's new jazz stuff I like. I listen to a lot of opera these days. So it's like I'm kind of going back. I never cared about opera when I was growing up, but my middle daughter is an opera singer, and she works at the Met. And, so she has exposed me to a lot of opera that I had not. And then I was also a little surprised that I know as much as I do, that I actually listened to more of it than I realized. I absorbed more of it when I was younger than I thought.
In your whole career, what are your highlights, like your personal favorite projects that you've ever worked on in music?
Well, I mean, all that. Marty's first album was one of the most fun records we ever made. It's called Unsophisticated Time. It's really fun. I mean, it's so hard to kind of narrow it down because I almost have never done anything I haven't really liked. I mean, not even for money. I mean, the few times that I've kind of taken a job that it's just so much money I have to do it, I've not ever really liked those records, and they've not turned out that great. But, I've been lucky enough to sort of make money from writing, from performing first, really, and producing people. And so I have those three things that I sort of get to kind of flip around between. I mean, most performers these days do write, but, you don't have to. I mean, Marti is a perfect example. Marti has written some great songs, but she doesn't think of herself as a writer like that. She's a painter, really. And so she gets a lot of her creative stuff out painting and sewing and stuff like that. Me, I'm just a musician in general, and all the different things I get to do. I mean, I've been, I was offered the job with Buddy Rich when I was still in college. So it's like, I came up playing standards and jazz and stuff like that, as well as rock music. And Arrogance started off my band that started when we were freshmen in college, which is where I met Mitch when he was still a freshman in high school. The first records we learned a lot of stuff off Abbey Road and the entire first Black Sabbath record. So it was like a very loud, sort of heavy band, but also singery, because Abbey Road was still a very singery thing. So the two of us were singers, and so I've always been interested in a lot of different kinds of things and producing a lot of different kinds of things. So it's hard to zero in on anything except Marty's first record.
I think that's a pretty good answer. You've just tuned in to another episode of The Cleveland Connection, and I hope you feel inspired to listen to some of these records that Don Dixon talked about today. You can keep up with both Don and his wife Marti at their shared Facebook page, where they occasionally post about concerts and other music events in town. Thank you to Don for talking with me. It was such a treat to hear these stories. Thank you to Nylor also for the song Phantasms, which you're hearing behind me right now and also heard at the beginning of this podcast. Be sure to follow Cleveland Magazine online at clevelandmagazine.com, on social media, and in print for more stories like this one. I'm Annie Nikoloff. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Cleveland Connection.